Hey guys, welcome back to One Candle Society for another One Candle Paranormal Case File. Here with your host Vic Whateley
and Marcus D. And guys, we want to take a quick second to thank all of our patrons on Patreon who make this possible. We want to give a big shout out to Caleb, John, Ray, Red, Ricky, and Sarah, who on Patreon support us and help make this such a better channel for you guys to experience. If you guys like our channel and you guys want to give out some support, go over to our Patreon and sign up today. We give exclusive videos to all of our patrons, as well as extra time in our newly released podcast, Talking with Shadows.
Also guys, this year's the year of the fans, so make sure you're putting out as many suggestions as you guys would like to see. Just leave them in the comments below, and likely, we'll end up doing them.
But for now, grab your binoculars as we go look at the Norwegian spiral anomaly.
On December 9th, 2009, the chill night air of Northern Europe was shattered by something truly bizarre and amazingly spectacular. A blazing bright, bluish-white spiral, tight-knit and in perfect formation, began to appear in the sky. As it extended outward, it continued to grow, and eventually the center part began to fade, leaving a dark black void which seemed to hover in the air for a few moments. The initial reports of this were quickly dismissed, but as reports began to pour in from parts of Norway and even parts of Sweden, it became more difficult to ignore. And then when footage from multiple angles started to appear, people knew they had to begin taking this very seriously. Videos which at first were believed to be the work of skilled photoshoppers and hoaxers quickly were revealed to be footage of a true, bizarre, and difficult to explain event. The event was so jarring, the term a Norwegian spiral is now synonymous for anything that looks too spectacular not to be photoshopped, but turned out to be real. Okay guys, the first thing we want to talk about today is the big missile-shaped Russian elephant in the room. Originally, when the spiral anomaly appeared, the Russian government said they were not doing missile testing. The story got going, and eventually they did end up admitting they were testing some missiles.
It took them about a day to finally come forward and admit that what they saw in Norway that day was actually a failed Bulva ICBM missile that had failed, I think, in the stage 3 of its test in the atmosphere.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it was a missile. We have seen people use this sort of response for other things like UFO crashes. So, what do you think, Marcus?
I think it's not entirely unbelievable that this could have been a missile failure that was in the sky. I know that a lot of people point to the fact that it took a day or so for the Russian government actually to come forward and admit that it was a Russian rocket that exploded. Why didn't they just come out right away and say, if you see stuff in the news media here about something in the sky, oh, the U.S. government is quick to go, no, that was just a plane that was in the sky, or no, it was this. It took time for the Russian government to come forward. I think that may have been a little bit of pride, I guess. They were like, no, nothing in Soviet Russia in any way, shape, or form ever is faulty. Our stuff is perfect 100% of the time. That's probably maybe what it was.
I mean, out of all the different theories on what it is, it does seem very likely to be a missile. But this missile, if we are talking about this being a missile failure, it failed spectacularly. It was just such an amazing sight, the way that it spiraled and stuff like that. It almost makes it unbelievable. And calling something like a Norway spiral is actually a term used for when something has a reasonable explanation, but I mean, it just looks so paranormal that it's hard to believe.
Well, a lot of people say that it has to do with it's just the perfect timing of everything that happened. The missile fails at twilight, releasing this fuel that has just this right reflection as it's spiraling out of control that is creating this amazingly hypnotic. I mean, it's hypnotic when you watch it. It's hard to look away from this thing. Show in the sky that's just what caused this. It was just a bunch of things going off at the right time.
Yeah, and it's spiraling in just a direction for most of the people to get it at that right sort of perspective, and it has the clearing away at the end, creating the appearance of a black hole. And this is where a lot of my big problems with the it was just a failed rocket test come in. It was almost a little too spectacular. There were almost a few too many amazing coincidences for me to 100% buy it. Now, what I will say is whatever it was something that produced a contrail. It's definitely there. You can see it fading away. You can see the smoke moving in the video. You have to look a little close to see it if you guys didn't catch it on one of your first go-arounds. But I am convinced that there is a contrail there.
But it's not uncommon for rockets that fail in like the third stage of its trajectory to spiral out of control like that. That is something that has happened in other missile failures before for other countries.
Yeah, but this one was so tight and so balanced that still I have a hard time believing that it was just this total accidental event.
I actually think that if this was a failed Russian missile, that this should be literally the the best example in any Russian fail video that's out there. Like, because it is failing in a spectacular fashion with the entire world watching.
It feels so hard it was a win.
Like, I feel like we should just be adding some sort of music, right, with some sort of gif of the Russian missile spiraling out of control.
I believe I can.
And this wasn't the only odd thing. Norway was having a special guest at the time.
They were. Barack Obama on December 10th actually accepted his Nobel Peace Prize. And I found that odd, I found that odd that if this was a Russian missile, that the Russians would be testing a missile when the President of the United States is coming to visit. And I also find it odd that the United States Secret Service allowed the president to be in an area where like these Russian missiles were failing overhead, or even if it was a paranormal event that this huge paranormal event occurred at.
There is some speculation that the whole thing was there to send a message to Barack Obama to get him a little more on page with the greater world. Some people believe that it was just Russia doing one of their kind of bolsterous threats. Other people say that it was testing of a black technology to kind of tell him to play ball.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that in any way, shape, or form, because first of the matter is I'm huge into watching the news and watching stuff like that, and I actually didn't know that these two events were on the same, that were that close together. I didn't know that. And I think, honestly, if this was some sort of way to send a message to Barack Obama, it would be all over the news, and news agencies would just be like just swarming over this.
Well, the Norway spiral anomaly, it kind of hit the news media real fast, real hard, but also kind of faded away kind of quick as well, as it was kind of eclipsed by Barack Obama, receiving his Nobel Peace Prize.
But this isn't the first time we've seen the news media downplay some sort of like spatial anomaly like this, or some sort of unidentified phenomenon. What about the Phoenix Lights, whenever that happened?
Oh yeah, tons of people saw the Phoenix Lights. It was real big. It popped up only a little bit in the media. There's some work to kind of keep it downplayed, but when it came to the Phoenix Lights, it just would not be pushed over. The people who saw what they saw stood strong.
Yeah, but I remember Barack Obama getting his Nobel Peace Prize. I remember people talking about it, the fervor that was circulated in the news at the time. And the Norwegian spiral just, it didn't register with me. Like, you think that they would be talking about these in tandem, but it's almost like one event was overshadowing the other.
Oh yeah, and think about it like normal missile launching sort of things. When there's something going on in Japan, when Japan has the world's eye on it, and then North Korea starts shooting missiles into the Sea of Japan. People speculate a ton on how these things are related and stuff.
Yeah. Did you see one thing where anybody was talking about Barack Obama being in the same country where there's a massive light phenomenon?
No,
not one thing. And it had to have been intentional for it to be framed that way.
It comes back to my big problem with this whole story. It all almost makes enough sense. There's just enough things to keep kind of pulling me back in on this and wanting me to come back. Like the missile failing just too right. This being covered too little. I really feel like there's something here, but it's really hard to point to one specific culprit.
But if it wasn't a missile test, then what was it? I mean, another theory that's thrown out there is, was it a black hole? Did a black hole form naturally man-made. It's a theory that's thrown out there. Don't give me that look. You guys can't see it, but he's like rubbing his head right now. Like,
I really am, because okay, it's not a black hole. If it was a black hole,
we'd be dead.
Yeah, we'd be dead, guys.
We'd be gone. There would be no one candle society. Because we are post Norway spiral. We are post that.
If the gravitation is strong enough to be a black hole, even if it's a quote unquote small black hole, I mean, if there would have been such major consequences that it'd be unlikely. I don't believe that there would still be life on Earth after that. Like, I don't think people realize how big of a deal a black hole would be appearing here. And I've heard this thrown out a lot online. I think it just comes down to people don't realize how dangerous a black hole is.
I just think they don't know science. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we're like the experts at it either, but I think we can all agree that if there's a black hole over Norway, we just wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I really definitely think it's not a black hole. I think we can go ahead and toss that one out. Another name that I've seen thrown around when it comes to the Norway spiral is Project Bluebeam, and man, that almost deserves its own very odd video itself.
Please, someone comment in the comments below for us to make a Project Bluebeam video. Please, I want to do one this season so badly.
Do you want to give the synopsis on this?
Yes, like Project Bluebeam, just in a quick nutshell, is this massive conspiracy by NASA to like prop up the Antichrist by like through these like different stages. And we're not going to get into all of the stages, but if the Norwegian spiral were to fit into the Project Bluebeam events, like if it was gonna be like one of these events, what it would be probably stage 2, where these massive projections are put up that form like deities in the sky, and then all of these deities eventually come together to form like the Antichrist, kind of like a Megazord from Power Rangers,
or Voltron,
or like a Megazord from Power Rangers. We're not going to use your words.
But there's a lot to Project Bluebeam, and all in all, I don't really think that's what's going on here, because it wasn't like a black portal opened and angels flew out.
I don't really know of any particular deity that is popular today that's just this black void in the night sky. So maybe they messed up. Maybe it was a failure on their part if that's the case. I don't know.
If it was associated with Project Bluebeam, which I kind of put in the not very likely to be a thing camp, my only thought on it would be maybe they were just testing the technology over a population to see if it would look convincing. And if that was the case, yeah, it looked convincing.
I think that if they were going to test it somewhere, I think you would probably test it somewhere over a populace that, I don't know, has a stronger connection. I don't want to say connection to religion, like a stronger like aspect of religion within its culture. Like, I don't know if Norway, I'm not saying they're not, but I just don't think that's not the first thing that comes to my mind if I'm trying to create this kind of a hoax.
Yeah, and if I remember right, Project Bluebeam is supposed to be working based off projections, holograms, light, reflecting light, those sort of things. But this seemed to have been like a literal contrail in the sky leaving gaseous residue, which my only way I could think a projection could do that is if it's literally boiling the atmosphere. And I don't think that's what's happening in this case.
But again, if you guys want us to go more into Project Bluebeam, what we think about that, put that in the comments below, and we'll make it for the season. The next thing that's on our list that this may be was that it may be some sort of after effect due to us activating the Hadron Collider, whether it's some sort of experiment on purpose, or maybe this is just something that we didn't know would happen whenever we activated the Hadron Collider.
Well, most of the people that I've heard talk about this and people that I've read talking about this usually kind of make this weird jump of, well, this thing appeared as a spiral, the Hadron Collider shoots particles around in a circular way, but that seems like a very kind of big leap, because I mean, it's shooting it around like on a big track, it's not spiraling them up. Like, even if you like removed part of the track that they're firing these particle beams out of and like kind of release the particles to shoot into the air, they're probably just going to go straight till they lose energy.
That actually was not the vibe I got whenever I was researching this. Because the people that say that it's the Hadron Collider sound a lot like just people that are just, I don't know, uneducated on the Hadron Collider, or just angry at it. They just want to blame everything on the Hadron Collider. Like Like, there's fog. There was probably a Hadron Collider that activated out there. This is doing all that. Or there's lights in the sky. That probably was the Hadron Collider. They turned it on. They shouldn't be doing that.
Like, do you remember when they first activated the Hadron Collider? The general sense of fear about it that existed. I think
we thought we
both
were
in college.
we thought we were going to destroy the planet just turning it on. I don't know if I wanted to have been the guy to flip that switch or press that button.
And I'm glad it's generally turned out to be mostly non-dangerous and advancing in science.
Maybe the only thing that's happened is massive swirling vortexes appearing in the sky. I would call that a plus if that's the only thing that's happened.
And the other thing is, what does the Hadron Collider do that would result in swirling vortexes in the sky? I mean,
it goes in circles, and therefore the Norwegian spiral is going to go in circles.
And and that's mostly my point when it comes to this theory is it seems to be making a really big leap just connecting to like how it moves. That's just really not something that the Hadron Collider is going to be able to do. Unlike our next suspect that maybe actually could have something to do with it. If a HARP-like facility in that area and the beam or smoke or whatever you want to call it, the anomaly comes from the direction of that facility, which is kind of interesting.
ESCAT, the European Incoherent Scatter Radar Site.
Possibly the worst name for anything?
I know, that doesn't sound like a place that I want to work at. Like, the Incoherent Scatter Radar Site. That just sounds like whatever you're going to do is not going to work.
And this is actually getting into an area where I feel like if they were wanting to, they could reproduce something along these lines. That this would be in an area of possibility. What they were trying to do there, I'm not really sure. Dimensional rift, maybe something.
It could be. I don't know. It's bizarre. I mean, there's so many theories that are circulated around these HARP-like sites all around the world. I mean, we made a whole video on HARP. We'll put it in the comments below if you guys want to check it out, because there's tons of theories that are around that. Everything from radio waves to mind control, weather manipulation, interdimensional rift creating, tons of stuff that's centered around these. And the weird thing is, though, is HARP, that's in Fairbanks, Alaska, is a tiny version of, say, ESCAT in Norway. So something way more powerful in Norway could make a much more powerful phenomenon.
Yeah, and there's so many things you can do when you have that level of technology. Even the stuff that we know they have there, there's a lot of potential for being able to do a lot of different things.
Like being some sort of Saturday morning cartoon villain threatening to control the weather unless you give them obscene amount of money.
I mean, probably yes, yeah. They likely could do something along those lines.
That's probably why I should never be in charge of one of those things. The last one up is the interdimensional rift theory, that some sort of massive interdimensional rift formed, something came out or something went in over Norway that night.
And I really like this one. This is a neat idea.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, this is one of those interesting things, like, you know, some sort of portal opens up that aliens go through or came out of that we didn't particularly see.
And it kind of looks like a portal opening at the end, as, you know, it just kind of... And you have this big dark hole sort of thing going on. I understand how people got to that conclusion, but we didn't see anything go in or out. It could always have been a test, but yeah. The main thing is that always gets me, that's kind of pulling me away from some of these more interesting ideas, is it did have those contrails. In a lot of ways, it did really look like it could be a rocket. Now, my big thing is, if it is a rocket, it doesn't seem to me like it was likely just a failed test, but I don't know why they would try to make such a spectacular light show that night.
I don't think they intentionally made a light show. I think that if it was a failed rocket launch, I think it was a perfect timing with the time of day, with twilight reflecting off of these burning fuel, these burning fumes, causing this light show up in the night sky.
Well, either way, one of the things that I think often gets looked over, and this is one of the biggest reasons I wanted to kind of do a dive into this case, is a lot of people speculate, if we saw something paranormal, there'd be rioting, there'd be looting, people would just be losing their minds. And that's effectively what we had here. We had a population viewing something they literally could not explain through normal means at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you had a lot of people calling the police at the time, but you didn't see rioting in the streets. You didn't see like some sort of massive economic collapse. in any Norway city that saw this thing.
No, basically what happened is a lot of people responded with awe. A few people responded with fear. But for the most part, they called people around. They tried to get answers. And that natural human inquisitive nature came out. And it makes me wonder if this is how we would respond if there was like a major UFO event, something along those lines would happen. If this is how we would likely respond.
So I'm going to ask you this. Do you think that if the Norway spiral had occurred over other cities around the world, that we would have had this sort of calm reaction to it that we had there?
I bet you that there would be a correlation between population density and more aggressive activities. I think the more people that you have, the more likely that you have that person to trigger that sparking event that brings it to violence. But I would say, generally, yeah, I think that's about the response that we're going to get. And I bet you the places that deviate are going to be based around it being a denser population center.
I mean, even in the Phoenix Lights phenomenon, you still had several people calling the police, but you didn't really see that in any major rioting or any major looting that occurs. I mean, and this is the number one theory as to why would, say, the government or anybody like that would hide aspects of the paranormal, is because the average populace couldn't handle it. But even though cities as large as Phoenix or the cities in Norway that saw these things didn't turn into absolute chaos because of that.
Oh yeah, I think it speaks a lot for the human spirit. And are we okay to go ahead and go into our thoughts?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean,
this is basically my thought, that they used a missile to create something that would be very difficult to explain away, to test to see how normal people would react to seeing something that bizarre, that strange, and that far beyond their normal experience. So they would know how people would react. They would only get a microcosm, and this probably would be a good area to kind of pick a population to test it on, because there's not a whole lot of risk going on there. And I kind of feel like they're just kind of testing the water to see what would happen. But then it just exploded way bigger, because people initially they would not stop asking questions about it. It really appealed to our curiosity. And I think they realized we were going to beat that dog to death until we had an answer. But what do you think?
For me, I have a hard time accepting that this was just some sort of random failed rocket experiment. You have a superpower like Russia knowing that an important political figure like Barack Obama, the president of the United States, is going to be coming to Norway, and you're going to be testing a rocket that in some way, shape, or form could be considered a threat or a danger to this particular person. And, you don't see these sorts of things. You don't see North Korea launching missiles at the time whenever South Korea diplomats are coming over. They didn't do that when President Donald Trump came over. They're not doing that. Whenever there's United Nations meetings around New York, you don't see the United States firing off rockets around this time. You just don't see stuff like that. That's why I have a hard time believing that it was just some sort of a simple rocket failure. Now, what could it be if it wasn't that? I don't know, but it goes back to something that's more important for me in the paranormal. I said this in other videos before. You got people talking about stuff in the paranormal, which I think is incredibly important. That we're talking about these phenomenon and not necessarily just accepting every explanation that's given to us. That we question it, that we look at all of these different possibilities and ask why. And if it's not something, what could it be? But leave your thoughts about it in the comments below.
Hey guys, thank you for selecting the Norwegian spiral to be a video for us to do. This was one of our glimpses in the dark, and I really wanted to talk this one out, because I really do feel like this just gets brushed over so much. Like every time you want to talk to someone about it, they go, oh no, that was just a missile and there's nothing to talk about it.
No, there's a lot that we could talk about. We went over numerous different theories about what this thing could be, and that's just what makes stuff in the paranormal so cool, is talking about all of these different theories and why or why not. That's the coolest thing about that stuff. If you guys really like the video, don't forget to leave a like. Leave us a comment. We love seeing those. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you guys can stay up to date on all the latest content coming out of One Candle Society. But also don't forget to hit that little notification bell so you can be notified whenever we put out a new video.
And a second super big thanks to our Patreons. Guys, you really let us do this.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for giving us that support. It means a lot to us. And any time that we can thank you guys and provide you guys with more content, we're going to do that.
Also, check out our podcast, Talking with Shadows. If you haven't already seen it, check it out. Let us know what you think.
It is. It's a lot like some of our videos, but in a much longer format. Me and Vic go back and forth on a whole bunch of different topics. Our very first episode was about urban monsters. It's really cool. You can get it on any device where you guys get your podcasts: Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, anything like that.
And that's where you guys can really see us arguing it out on
Yeah,
stuff.
we do, man. We argue even more on there, and it's a lot of fun, and we try to have a lot more fun on our podcast. But don't forget, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.